The first talk of this session is Mike Barrie and Moonhyun Sung, Quasi Pni in Tagalog, Internal Reconstruction. Let's welcome them.
Okay. Can I go?
Yes, please do.
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So we are going to talk about Quasi-Pni in Tagalog, and let me briefly walk you through the presentation. Okay. So firstly, we are going to re-examine some data on pseudo-noun incorporation in Tagalog, especially from STAR 2015, and we are going to argue that the Tagalog Pni behave actually differently from typical Pni, and we are going to name that as Quasi-Pni. Firstly, in Quasi-Pni constructions, you don't observe strict adjacency between the verb and the noun, and also nominals are case marked, especially with the noun morpheme we are going to talk about later in the presentation. And however, Quasi-Pni constructions do come with some typical semantic Pni properties, such as, however, those constructions lack syntactic properties of Pni. And we are going to suggest an analysis as to this, which is internal restructuring. Internal restructuring. The term was suggested by, well, the term adapted from Ritzy. So, like Pni constructions, Tagalog quasi-Pni constructions lack functional material in the nominal structure, such as KP or DP. However, when those material is removed, they removed from the middle rather than from the root. Sorry, I just said KP, but KP is still present, but DP or non-P are absent. And we are going to make some suggestions on the semantics of structured case and explain how Quasi-Pni has the semantics of Pni without the syntactic properties of Pni. So let's go to section 2. So let me briefly talk about NIs and Pni, NI constructions and Pni constructions. So syntactic noun incorporation suggested by Baker. So it is basically where the noun is completely fused with the verb like a suffix, like an affix. So when you look at the data 1, you can notice that the tobacco in 1A, which has like nominalizing affixes around it, becomes just tobacco that attaches the verb like a prefix in 1B. So this is called noun incorporation. And pseudo noun incorporation, you can see the data in 2. Yes. So in 2, the 2A is just a regular transitive construction. So the subject gets the ergative case and the object gets the absolutive case. However, when the object is incorporated to the verb phrase, like to be, the object doesn't get the case anymore, and also the subject doctor gets the absolutive case. So this is pseudonoun incorporation. And pseudonoun incorporation, you can see some morphosyntactic characteristics. We kind of messed up with our handout, so the morphosyntactic characteristics of Pni appears above the data. Okay, so as you can see, Pni nouns do not have any case marking, and also they do not have typical extended functional projections, which are kind of mandatory with other regular like argument DPs. And can we go to semantic characteristics? So, okay, so Pni nominals are number neutral and they're indefinite, and you cannot actually refer to Pni nominals by like pronouns, and they take obligatory they obligatorily take low scope in relations to modal or negation or quantifier. So we have a piece of data from Blackfoot in 3. So this sentence means they also an eagle. In this case, all scopes over eagle, which means that like they also an eagle. It's not the case. There is an eagle that everybody saw. So this is semantic. These are semantic characteristics of Pni. And let's go to 2.2. So in Tagalog, yes. In Tagalog, object the noun morpheme noun morpheme, and in star, the noun objects in Tagalog was analyzed as Pni nominals. Because noun-marked objects receive a general number reading, while ang, which is a different case marker, so ang-marked objects do not. Moreover, noun-marked objects with an adjective resist general number. But in a subsequent study that replicated STAR's investigation, which is ours, we found that noun-marked objects with an adjective can also exhibit a number neutrality for some speakers. Finally, it has been observed that noun-marked arguments can be specific or unspecific in contrast to sa-marked arguments. So let's go to section 3. Okay, so you can observe number neutrality of non-objects, and in contrast, you can see unmarked arguments are number specific, as you can see in 4. So as you can see, apples have the apples case marked with non, and it can be interpreted as just a single apple or some apples. If you add plural marker to manzanas, apples, then it is obviously interpreted as plural, so like several apples. However, if you case mark manzanas apple with ang, then it should be a single specific apple, like as you can see in 4C. So we are so far so good. We are happy. Okay. Can you go down? Yes. Thank you. So, as you can see in 5, okay, so let me go to 5A through C. So in 5A, you see book is marked with non, and it is number neutral. And if you add red, as you can see in 5B, it actually, it should be specific, but according to our investigation, it can actually be an unspecific, like it can be any red books. However, if you case mark liberal, the book with ang, then it should be a single book. And let's go to, okay, actually, can you skip data 6? I mean, is it, Yeah,
okay,
go ahead.
No,
yes. Okay. Okay. So, yes. So let's look at data number 7. So we tested a scope in relation to negation. So as you can see in 7a, so Hindi is the negation marker. In 7a, John didn't need an apple because they aren't any. And you see that Nang manzanas, which is Nang marked apple, scopes under Hindi, which is the negative marker, because you see that you can actually back the sentence with because there are any. So the apple doesn't exist at all. However, this is not always the case. As you can see in 7b, so Hindi kumain si Juan ng manzanas. So John did an apples, and another speaker can say, okay, I'll eat it then. In that case, ng manzanas comes over Hindi, and so you can have it afterwards. Can we go down? Okay. However, if you mark the apple, if you case mark the apple with ang, then you cannot, it must scope over the negation marker Hindi. So as you can see in 7c, Juan didn't eat the apple because it doesn't exist. Sounds odd because ang manzana scopes over Hindi. However, 7d is okay for obvious reason. And we test the data, test the sentence with modal dapat, which means should. Oh, our glasses. Okay, so 8A, in 8A, you see that John needs to eat an apple. And that apple scopes under dapat, so any apple can do. Like there's no specific apple that Juan should eat. However, if you say ang manzanas, like ang marked apple, then it should be a specific apple that Juan needs to eat. So you see the difference between nang marked objects and ang marked objects. However, so although Star analyzed non-marked objects as Pni nominals, you do see that Pni, like so-called Pni objects in Tagalog, do not observe the lineal adjacency condition, which is very essential for Pni. For instance, in Nuean, strict adjacency is required between the verb and the incorporate noun. So as you can see, as you can see in 9, you see that non-marked objects are intervened by yesterday, which is an adverbial phrase which scopes pretty high, which adjoins the sentence pretty high. And in 9b, you see manner adverb, dahan, which is slowly, comes between the verb and non-marked objects. So we thought we need a different analysis as to this data. And
okay, we typically think of restructuring as chipping away, metaphorically chipping away from the highest projection. So verb can select a full CP, but it can restructure and take a TP or a little VP or something like that. And likewise for the nominal domain, if we can think of incorporation or pseudo incorporation as the verb selecting just a smaller nominal projection. What we want to suggest is something slightly different based on an analysis from Romanian, from Alboiu 2009, where you see a complementizer. However, there's no evidence for tense, but you can still get epistemic adverbs and topicalized phrases, which these things suggest a CP layer. So there's an example in 10 that Alboiu used for her analysis of what we're calling internal restructuring. This is the gerund here with a topicalized subject and an epistemic adverb here. So what her analysis was is that CP selects the aspect phrase directly with no intervening TP. And we're suggesting the same sort of thing here. Whoops. Okay. So so here are the two sentences, the two core cases that we want to look at, where you have the object with the noun case, and here the object with the ang case, where the noun one, of course, has all the has many of the typical Pni properties. So what we're proposing is that that the noun is somehow defective, which we're not going to make totally clear yet, but that it selects a little np directly with no intervening dp or nump. So the structure is what you see here in 13, and then, you know, if you want to see the nice, whoops, fun, the nice trees, here they are. So like the many of the noun objects that we've been looking at appear as in 14a, and the ang objects and other regular nominals would appear as in 14b with the full extended projection. Okay. Case features. Now, so how do we do this? Case features are, well, we said typically, but I shouldn't say, we shouldn't say that. So sometimes assumed to be uninterpretable. There's lots of discussions, of course, on the semantic denotation of D and different kinds of determiners and the semantic denotation of nump and so forth. But I've really been able to find very little on the semantic denotation of K. Oh dear, how did that happen? Okay, so there is some sort of link between K and D and definiteness, but what we want to propose, what we think is that definiteness and specificity might derive from K somehow for the ang-marked cases. But for the default case, what we want to say is that it's just semantically opaque. And so the denotation of a non-KP is essentially the denotation of the sister of the K head. And how you do that within, how you do that semantically, we want to hopefully get help from a semanticist. So there's a long tradition of treating DP as type E and NP or little np, whatever, as type ET. And if this defective K selects a little np, then that KP is just going to have exactly the same semantics as a little np. So our analysis for quasi-Pni then basically is as follows, with the noun, as well, just as we said, the KP has the same denotation as a little np, namely it's a type ET, and it has the same semantics, and I'm running out of time, as bare nominals in more traditional Pni languages. Nump is missing, so there's no specification of number. The presence of K, however, does require case checking, which does entail all of the usual privileges that a case-marked object has, that is, moving around, scrambling, that kind of thing. And for 14b, the KP in 14b takes DP as a complement, and that's just the normal case. And so I won't go into that very much. So the upshot then is that that the non-K can take either a DP or a little NP as a complement. We haven't shown it here, but and Elena Paul can tell you about this, that the non-marked DP can be specific if it has the right modifications to it. Ang-marked, the ang-marked K takes only a DP as a complement. So back to this one observation we had, where we had the speaker variation with the object. This is purely speculational at this point, but if we assume that sort of a more traditional analysis, that is where adjuncts like adjectives adjoin to some maximal projection. That is, so we're not some kind of Qinghuian cartography, but the traditional adjunction analysis. Individual grammars may allow adjectives to adjoin in different locations. So if some speakers, if the adjective adjoins above little np, then the only way to get an adjective is if you have the full extended nominal projection, and such a speaker will not exhibit the number neutrality effects in the noun marked nominals. And whereas other speakers, if the adjective adjoins to little np, then you have a little np, and then you can get and such a speaker would have number neutrality. Okay, so to conclude extremely quickly, we said that the properties of the noun marked object in Tagalog result from its syntactic structure. Specifically, the noun object consists of a KP that selects little np directly, which we're calling internal restructuring. And we dubbed this construction the Quasi-Pni, as it has some of the properties of Pni, but still has some properties of a full nominal. And we suggested that case, at least the noun case, is semantically opaque. So the denotation of KP is the same as the denotation of the sister of K for noun. And while K typically takes a DP as a complement, a defective K noun can take a bare little np as a complement. And it remains to be seen whether this analysis can be carried over to other similar constructions like partitive, infinish, and things like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll have some time for questions, about 8 minutes. You can let me know in the chat if you have a question. Yes, Dan has a question. Dan Brockton.
Thank you very much for the talk. Really interesting stuff. So I have a question about antipassives, and specifically what the difference is between a quasi-pseudo noun incorporated object and a regular antipassive object, right? Because many of the properties here are typical properties of antipassive objects, number neutrality, right? Like scope, like obligatory low scope. And so without a word order constraint, like a linear adjacency constraint, what is the difference between a quasi-pseudo, a QPNI'd N, and an antipassive object? Thank you.
Well, okay, we haven't really looked at antipassives in details. In detail. So for I'm not sure, but for an antipassive in Tagalog, do you still get like so let's look at 4A since it's right here on the screen. Do you get the notional subject with an on case in an antipassive? Sorry, this is I should be answering this question.
I mean, I'm sorry. This is an antipassive, right? Like on the ergative analysis, the 4A is already an antipassive.
I see what you mean. Okay, sorry. Well, okay. Good question. Yeah, because I think very little. Sorry, I'm racking my brain trying to think if there is something more specific I can say about that. I'm sorry. But I'll have to check. Some of the antipassive literature on this and see where the two analyses might differ empirically. But yeah, thank you very much. I mean, that's what I have to do next.
Thank you. Henrison has a question.
Hi, thanks for this talk. I may have missed this, but I guess I'm wondering so regarding your analysis about the noun objects in, I guess, 14A, or your structure for it, is that what you're assuming happens all the time for noun objects, or do you assume, or do you propose that there's sometimes you have this kind of smaller structure and maybe sometimes you have a bigger structure.
Well, we're thinking that sometimes it's a little NP or sometimes it's a full DP. So Noun objects can combine with modifiers such as specific. So like, so you get something like so like for A. So you could have bumili ang babae nang, and then some adjective meaning specific, manzanas, and then it means that she bought a specific apple, and we're assuming in those cases that it selects a full DP as a complement.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Elena has a question.
Yeah, it's more a comment, and I think well, I was just wondering if you have read James Collins' paper on Tagalog case. It's in NLLT.
No, we haven't, sorry.
It's called Definiteness Determined by Syntax, a case study in Tagalog. So he's looking at more or less these issues. I don't know that he talks about the number neutrality. I avoided looking at number neutrality because the speakers I was working with didn't seem to have any number neutrality.
Well, we tested with.
I would look at his paper. It's just my suggestion.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, we tested that a while ago. We sort of, I mean, number neutrality is fairly straightforward, but we did like sort of a picture matching, like a woman buying one apple and a woman buying several apples, and could you use this sentence in this context? And when there's no adjective there, almost all of them said it could be number neutral. I think just one person did not have number neutrality. And then with the adjective there, they were like pretty evenly split. Half of them could do number neutrality and half couldn't. About it, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying I don't believe it exists. It's just for whatever reason, the people, so that's why I didn't look at it, because they didn't have it.
Because they didn't have it, yeah. So no, thank you. We'll definitely take a look at the NLLC paper then.
Aldrin Lee has a question. Would you like me to read it out, or would you like to unmute yourself? I can read it out. Okay, the question is, have you explored post-nominal modification, pulang manzanas versus manzanas na pula? Because this has some implications on the reading, restrictive versus non-restrictive.
Oh, no, we only did the pre-nominal modifiers. If we get a chance, we'll test that. So yeah, no, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mitchell has follow-up questions.
Thanks. So just building on what Henderson said. So my understanding is, I think modifiers like specific are not necessarily the problematic cases for taking something really small. Well, as long as it can be modified anyway. I mean, if specific somehow signals that you're doing like so Schwarzschild has this discussion about sometimes you can have nominals that you just contextually restrict to a singleton domain. And so you're just referring to a specific, you just limit it to a domain where you're talking about a specific individual, and maybe that's what a modifier like specific does. And so that technically would be compatible with a small non-quantificational structure.
Yeah.
I think the real issue is, I think Noun can take numerals, but also like quantificational phrases, I think.
Yeah.
Right? So those are the ones where I would want to know, I don't know the facts. They might exist in the literature about how they take scope in relation to quantifiers with ang or sa, for example. But I think descriptively, at least, Noun can take them. And so those are the ones where I would really think you have at least some cases where it really has to take a large nominal.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good idea. And sorry, that was Schwarzschild, right?
Yeah, Roger has
Mhm.
this idea about specific indefinites,
Okay.
which I can dig up if you're interested.
Yeah, I'll email you about that. Yeah.
Sure.
Thanks.